Now, North Korea had fired 2 short-range ballistic missiles as part of a tactical nuclear strike drill on Wednesday.
And this is not the first time that North Korea has fired any kind of missile. Well, the country's state media reported that these were simulated scorched earth nuclear strike on targets across South Korea.
And the latest strikes come as South Korea and the United States wrap up their large-scale military drills. The ballistic missiles were fired towards the East Sea or the Sea of Japan. South Korea says these missiles traveled about 360 kilometers before landing on the country's east coast.
The Japanese media reports that the missiles fell outside of its exclusive economic zone, and there are no damages reported in the strike so far.
However, these were reportedly, as Rahisha mentioned earlier as well, scorched earth nuclear strikes. That means they sought a widespread destruction. And the launch came amid the ongoing US-South Korea Alchi Freedom Shield exercise, which has been strongly denounced by North Korea.
Absolutely. Now, just hours before the launch, US deployed its B-1B bombers for the joint air drills, and this is further speculated to have angered Pyongyang more.
North Korea says the launch aims to send a clear message to the enemies, and the country itself conducted command-level army drills on Tuesday in response to these exercises. Those drills aim to fully prepare the North Korean army for war, as per the country's state media.
Now, Pyongyang has conducted a record number of weapons tests this year. In reacting to the latest launch, US says that it clearly violates multiple United Nations Security Council resolutions.
The United States also raised concerns about the growing cooperation between North Korea and Russia at the United Nations. It said that during the recent visit to Pyongyang by Russian Defense Minister, both sides drove closer to a deal where Russia will buy munitions from North Korea for its war in Ukraine.
Our information further indicates that following Shoigu's visit, another group of Russian officials traveled to the DPRK for follow-up discussions about potential arms deals between the DPRK and Russia. Russia is negotiating potential deals for significant quantities and multiple types of munitions from the DPRK to be used against Ukraine. These potential deals could also include the provision of raw materials that would assist Russia's defense industrial base.
Now, the growing tensions in the Korean Peninsula has prompted a greater cooperation between the United States of America, South Korea and Japan.
And the leaders of the 3 countries recently held their first ever trilateral meeting at Camp David, where they agreed to share North Korean missile warning real-time data as well.
And for more on this, we're now being joined by Rich Outson from Washington. He's a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council and the Jamestown Foundation. Outson has served in the U.S. Department of State from 2016 to 2021. Thank you so much for joining us on WION, Mr. Outson.
Good to be with you.
Right. Now, Mr. Outson, this is not the first time that North Korea has staged tactical nuclear strike drills to protest the allied exercises between US and South Korea. We've seen this happening in the past as well. Now, if reports are to be believed, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un could be gearing up for an all-out war against South Korea.
Well, technically, the state of war between North Korea and South Korea never ended, right? So there has not been a peace treaty following the war that ceased active combat in 1953. So in a sense, North Korea is an armed state, an armed camp. Really, it's an entirely militarized state with close to no personal liberties or individual freedoms. And the way that Kim Jong-un and his predecessors have justified this is by constantly convincing his people that the South, the imperialists, the Americans, the Koreans, and so forth, are bent on invading. But of course, there is no war plan that calls for the Americans and the South Koreans to go north. This is simply a tool in a very old game that KJU plays to keep his own people in shackles, and so that they put up with the various impositions of an impoverished and entirely militarized state. So he conjures up this image that the United States is interested in nuclear war or an invasion. And of course, it's never been true, and certainly not in the last 5 decades. So it's, in that sense, it's an old game, and not the first time he's done nuclear saber rattling as part of that game.
Right. Well, that being said, as per US intelligence, Russia and North Korea, they're actively advancing high-level talks for more weapons. What implications will this have, let's say, in South Korea, Japan, as well as, of course, the war in Ukraine?
Right. Well, they are interrelated, of course. In a sense, it's very damning of the Russians that the arms deals that are being contemplated are supplying, would be to supply the Russians with material produced in North Korea. This is a pretty sad state. But the Russians, like the Ukrainians, are also consuming vast amounts of artillery ammunition. In terms of what's going on in the Asian theater, I think, of course, this Camp David, the first standalone meeting of the leaders of South Korea, Japan, and the United States, is a signal achievement. It's very important, showing cooperation, and it's part of a network of democracies, really, in Asia that includes India, that have been tightening cooperation because of a more aggressive and bellicose China. Now, North Korea is a sort of the stepson of China in this regard and serves their strategic interests. So when the free countries of East Asia, and with the United States as a Pacific power, strengthen their cooperation because of rising Chinese ambition, of course, there's some sort of blowback for the North Koreans as well. So they probably do feel threatened by this, and they're not prepared to deal with it. They have a very weak Navy. So instead of saying, well, we're going to have naval drills when you have naval drills, what they do is they pretend to be interested in firing nuclear weapons.
All right. Well, Mr. Alden, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Always a pleasure to have you with us, and thank you so much for your insights.
Good to see you as well.